I think you will find this chapter a well deserved and needed break. This chapter has a lot of definitions in it, but it's more just giving you a good foundation of a couple of these concepts. A lot of what this chapter is talking about is decentralization. I want you to know I did post a video of Johnson & Johnson CEO talking about decentralization. He gives a great definition of it as well as tells you how it works in his company, and they've been very successful with that. So make sure you watch at least a couple of minutes of that. It's about the 3-minute mark where he talks about the decentralization. Again, there's a lot of definitions in this chapter. Just go through them. I think you'll find that a lot of the concepts should be familiar from managerial accounting, like the responsibility accounting and all these cost centers. And then it goes through a little bit of how we can allocate cost and looking at ethical concerns in that, especially when it comes to things like bonuses and business travel. So let's take a look at a few things. Make sure, again, that you really focus on that decentralization, know the advantages and disadvantages of that. And because there's not a lot of homework, but the homework that is in there is some equations, but the chapter doesn't give you how to do any of these things. So I do want to walk you through those math concepts in this chapter. I want to give you one homework hint. I just thought this homework problem was interesting, and I thought maybe a lot of you could relate to this. So I did include it, but it doesn't tell you how to calculate what business travel reimbursement should be. So I thought we should kind of walk through this. So in this problem, you have an employee who travels from Chicago to Paris for business, but then tacks on a couple of extra trips for personal reasons while he's there and then flies home. So they're asking how much of that can be reimbursed for business travel. From the company standpoint, the lowest that they could reimburse is the trip, looking at it from a one-way, a round trip, what can you get for that round trip fare? So they would look that up, and that's the lowest that you can reimburse. Now the employee did buy a one-way ticket from Chicago to Paris, the original location to the business location. So from an employee standpoint, the highest he could get reimbursed would be double that, because he only bought that ticket and then he bought other tickets. So the highest he could get reimbursed would be that double that one-way ticket, which was business related. So again, just take a look at that. Again, we're looking at ethical reasons around these business reimbursements, but I just thought that was interesting. The other concepts that we go through are this dual rate method of allocating costs. So I'm going to walk you through a couple of those. Again, this is kind of looking at like the ABC costing and the other allocations that we've done. So this is kind of simple math. Should be familiar, but I just want to make sure you understand how to do it. So in this problem, we're going through all different kinds of ways to allocate costs. In A, they want to allocate cost based on the number of calls. So the total cost we're trying to allocate is this $8 million, and we're going to allocate it to these two areas, Air Express and ground service. So in Air Express, if it's based on number of calls, we'll look to that piece here, and we're just going to allocate based on that. So Air Express is responsible for $490,000. I'm going to eliminate some of those zeros to save space, and we're just going to divide that by the total to get the proper allocation. and times that by the 8 million, which would give us a total of 5.6 million. That ground, the number of calls they receive is the 210,000. We divide that by the total. Oops. Times that by the 8 million. And you're going to get 2.4 million. You can always double check, make sure you did it right by adding these two numbers together, and it should come out to what you're trying to allocate. Just a quick, easy way to make sure you didn't screw up with the calculator somewhere. In B, they're saying, well, what if we allocated based on time? So let's try this now using time as our allocation. So again, same thing, we're looking at Air Express versus ground. Air Express is responsible for 350,000 hours. We'll divide that by the total. And we'll times that by the 8 million. Which is going to give us 2 million. Now I know I can do the math again if I wanted to. Times it by 8 million, but I know without even using it, because I'm allocating the 8 million, that this should be 6 million. So now you can see by looking at the ground difference in the cost allocation, what an impact this could have on your overall net income and everything else for that division. That's why it's so important to look at these numbers. In C, now we're using that dual rate where they say 5.2 million of this is fixed cost, and the fixed cost should be allocated based on time, and then the remaining cost is going to be based on the number of calls. So this is that dual rate. We're just going to take it again one by one. Look at our air division, and then bring all those numbers forward. So let me change colors here so you know what I'm doing. So for C, if I look at Air Express, I have to find those fixed costs, which I know are the 5.2 million, and it's based on time. So I'm going to take the 350 divided by that total time, times that by the 5.2 million, which is 1.3 million. Then I'm going to look at those variable costs. The variable costs are going to be based on calls. So that would be the 490 divided by the total calls. And the remaining variable cost would be 2.8 million. Because remember, this total has to be 8 million. So the amount I would allocate to variable cost would be 1.96. So if I wanted to fill out this chart for the Air Express, 1.3 million, 1.96 million, for a grand total of 3,260,000. Now let's look at this, and we'll look at the ground service. When we have to pull out the fixed, again, fixed is based on those hours divided by the total times the 5.2 million, which is 3.9 million. And I'm going to look at the variable, which is based on number of calls. Oops, that should be a 2.8 million for a total of 840,000. I can fill those numbers in here to get that grand total of 4,740. So you can see how just allocating costs differently are going to impact your different segments of your business. If you have any other questions on this, please let me know.